Hello, 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 and welcome back to the continued journey into the World Cup group stages with myself, Gary Stryker, the Cooligan, as we explore Group D for this FIFA World Cup 2026. Cooligan, Group D, we have, of course, an interesting bunch here. The US, Paraguay, Australia, and Turkey. Exciting one. Exciting.
No, it's a good one. I don't think it's particularly good for the United States, but it's a good one. I mean, I don't want to beat up on the poor U.S., but that was a disastrous international break for them.
Yes.
It was an utterly unimpressive, or one could take the flip side and say that it was an incredibly impressive set of defeats, right? Like, it was impressive in just how poorly orchestrated they looked and how they did not come together. Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about something positive, ladies and gentlemen.
Well,
go to the hooligan-soccer.com where you can read more about the trials and travails of all of the countries that are going to be coming into the World Cup. We'll be doing some in-depth coverage on all of that, in addition to podcasts about every group, talking about the ins, the outs, who's up, who's down, who we like, who we don't like, and general banter and good-natured ribbing that we do against all of the soccer nations, right? So please come,
Indeed.
like, follow, subscribe.
Wonderful, wonderful. So in terms of this group, who we've got, obviously, of course, this is the US will be hosting. The last time, obviously, was in 1994 when they hosted the World Cup. I've got Paraguay, who also haven't been to a World Cup since 2010. This is their first time in a World Cup for over a decade. Australia, the affectionately known as the Socceroos. The Socceroos will be there, and of course Turkey, who have managed to get in through the UEFA pathway. They just managed to scrape through and sort of make this as well, because obviously they were sort of they were a bit touch and go there as well. So which one, any particular sort of teams or players that you want to start with there, Cooligan, as well as we explore this group?
Let us start with young Turkey. All right, let's start with Turkey, because they were one of the later qualifiers. They came through the UEFA path C. Congratulations to Turkey. I personally am excited to see them in the group because some of my favorite young players right now in Europe happen to be Turkish, right?
Yes.
So, excuse me for 1 second. I got to sneeze. No, I don't. Yes, I do. Anyway, my physical frailties notwithstanding, the Turks, nice to see them here. Congratulations on coming through. They didn't have an easy time against Kosovo, but yeah, all the same, I still have fond memories of watching the Turks back. Oh my goodness, this was 2002, when they made that miraculous comeback, scoring 2 goals in stoppage time. I remember I was in the gym on an elliptical machine or a treadmill watching this in real time and screaming my head off, and nobody could understand what was happening because it was on my little tiny, screen and
LCD display in 2002. Yes,
exactly, right. And so but no, the World Cup will be a better place because the Turks are there, but that they're making it is a disaster for the United States.
Yeah,
I'm going to say it right now, because they are going to be tough to beat.
And incidentally, I think the US-Turkey game is actually the last game of the group phases as well, being played in SoFi in LA.
Where it's probably really going to matter.
It's going to really matter. So and those Turkish fans are enthusiastic, to say the least, and sort of put it mildly. They are.
I'd say the US fans are no slouches, though. I mean, listen, when it comes to supporting our team, we do a pretty good job, right? That the United States shows up. But at the same time, we can also be extraordinary, like many countries. We can be very critical of our team, and the belief in the American team is got to be at an all-time low right now. After that, they were on a high coming in to the international break. They had 5 games, 5 wins in a row. They had completely dismantled Uruguay. You can argue that it wasn't a full-strength Uruguay. It doesn't matter. But they just were embarrassed. They were absolutely embarrassed. And so there's going to be some serious, and then, of course, some terrible news on the U.S. camp. Patrick Aguimon is going to miss the World Cup because of an Achilles problem, right?
Yeah.
So right after, going back and playing for Derby County, he blew his Achilles, and it's like, wow, that was hard. That's
hard,
tough.
Yeah.
Because he was going to be one of those young players for me to keep an eye on in this World Cup. So our hopes for him for a very speedy recovery, but I know he won't be at this tournament. That's a big loss. That's a big loss.
Yeah, it is.
So now we've talked about those two, but Australia, Paraguay.
Yeah,
Gary, give me your thoughts on these two. I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
I'm looking through the rosters as well. This group for me is actually quite open, right? If we just look on the surface about sort of form and sort of reputation of the players as well, I would say Turkey are the strongest team in this group, and they probably should go through and qualify, right? Then the question is, who takes that second qualification spot? You would assume with the US traditionally, there has only been ever one World Cup where the host nation have not got out of the group phase, and that was South Africa in 2010. Normally, I lied. That's not true. Qatar in 22 as well. Forgive me. Yes. Okay. So there have been 2 instances. So there is. Caught myself there before you did.
That's good. No, you did it.
So yeah. So I think the US have to get out of this group now. Again, this is one of those things where the home field advantage and sort of the sentiment should hopefully propel and act as a tailwind and sort of push the sort of US men's national team through the group phases. However, it depends. If they get off to a bad start, all of a sudden that tailwind becomes a very, very strong headwind, and it becomes pressure and challenging as well. I would say Australia are beatable from a US perspective.
They did it. They did it before, right? We have a good history of beating Australia, but there's only one problem with that. Australia has a very, very good history of beating the living crap out of our players and causing injuries. So I mean, no, and I don't mean that like they're intentionally targeting people. I'm not saying that, but the way they play, they get gritty, they get ugly, and that could be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, if you do look at sort of basically the roster and the squad that Australia have, just looking through them, they've got some decent players. I mean, I'm just trying to think, like, could you think of, like, who would you say is Australia's best player? And I'm looking through this list and I see just a bunch of sort of like goodish players, playing at a decent level, some Premier League players, some MLS players. I think, I can't think of anyone in Australia who I think, okay, that's actually sort of a superstar for Australia. So if they come up and play as a team,
that is exactly right. In fact, I think really for one of the first times in Australia, this is absolutely not one of their strongest squads, right? That they've been able to put together. And in fact, I'd say that they're probably more superstars and big names on the New Zealand team than there are on the Australian team, that at least that most people would be able to recognize. Now, that doesn't mean that Australia doesn't have a chance. Again, they make World Cups, even though they took themselves out of the Oceanic Confederation and moved into Asia. They still go through, right? They still rip through the Asian confederations pretty effectively.
Consistently, they're often there, aren't they? Yeah,
absolutely. So, there's a reason why they're here. I think we're just going to be hard-pressed to sit there and go, well, yeah, it's because of X, Y, or Z player. No, it's because of their sort of collective mentality and their pride in their country and their pride in their program, right? I mean, they play for the green and yellow. They are also, I'm excited because they're using Oakland, California as their home base. So I'm hoping to run into a couple of Australians. I don't know if I'll get access, but I would love to be able to, to see what's happening. All of their games are being played on the West Coast, as I understand it. They play in Vancouver. They play in Paraguay in the Levi Stadium down in San Jose. And then they finish up, I think, down in Los Angeles. So it makes sense for them to be based on that West Coast.
Easy. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think, as you say, I think Australia, they normally a good cohesive team. So again, it depends how sort of, how they sort of operate as a team. And then of course there's the other country in there as well, is Paraguay. Now, again,
right.
Paraguay, I would say also not too dissimilar to Australia in the sense of there's no stars that jump out at me that you recognize as a household name, but they do seem to have quite a few. Again, Paraguay as a footballing nation, it's their national sport, of course, like all the South American countries, but they are generally very technical. They are very quick. And obviously generally very fit. In fact, actually, I'll take that back. Actually, they have Miggy Almiron, obviously from
Yeah, I was
Atlanta
going to
United.
say, how could you forget?
Miggy
How
is,
could you
well,
forget
yeah,
the man with
well,
the man with the $1 million smile,
yeah.
Miguel
So they have,
Almiron? Yeah,
yeah, Miggy will probably be their sort of, their star player. And again, typical of the Paraguayans, quick, dynamic, very technical as well. And sort of, they can be very dangerous. So I wouldn't write Paraguay off as well. So this honestly
no,
is
not at all. No,
quite an open group in terms of who qualifies. Of course, as I say, I think Turkey, dominant team. I think Turkey should win this group. And then the question is as I say, can the US work together and pull together and start and actually get some points and move on and qualify through this and not have this being a disaster. In terms of, what I am excited about, as well as particularly as you mentioned before, is the young players in these teams as well. I agree with you. Turkey has 2 young players in particular that I am big fans of, and I think have actual possibilities to be named as young player of the tournament, assuming they go deep into the competition and do quite well. And that is, of course, Kenan Yildiz, who we know, and obviously we've covered
sure.
quite a bit at Juventus. He is
Yep.
absolutely fantastic at 20 years old. He will probably get a move after this tournament because he'll cover himself in glory. There is also a Porto striker that they have by the name of Dennis Gul. I think I'm pronouncing that, spelled G-U with an umlaut L. He's 21 years old, quite a tall, strapping Turk. And then, of course, Real Madrid have this Arda Güler, who's forced his way into the Real Madrid team. And he was playing yesterday in that Champions League game against Bayern Munich. And he looked also very, very reliable. And then, of course, there's a number of other players around there who play at a decent level across the Turkish league and the Premier League and other areas. So,
I agree with your assessment. Arda Güler, Kenan Yildiz, and Gul, all fantastic. They're going to be, they're going to be ones to watch without a doubt. And you're right. If they go deep, highly, highly likely that they could take home some individual silverware and trophies.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And then, of course, if we look into the US team, I mean, again, the biggest star, I think, is obviously Christian Pulisic, who is, his form has not been great for Milan this season.
It's been terrible.
So, yeah,
it's been terrible
been great.
in 2026. He was actually very good at the beginning of the year. He exploded onto the scene, both in Champions League and League. He was doing really, really well. But
I think he's just had, he's had little frustrating injuries. There's been high hamstrings, groins, calves, those kind of issues as well.
When you play as much as he does, it makes sense.
Of course. Yeah. And so I know he will be definitely carrying the weight of the nation on his shoulders as well. Of course, one of my favorite US men's team's players is Timothy Weah, who is the son of George Weah, the former president of Liberia. He's obviously playing at Marseille at the moment in the Champions League, and we've been covering him. Again, Weston McKennie as well, as we know, who plays at Juventus, of course, with Kenan Yildiz as well. So they know each other quite well. These guys will be there. And then for you, are there any younger, because I know you're across a lot more of the US players more than I am. Are there any young players, up and coming young players, that are also captivating your eye, that you're excited to see, give a chance and see if anything happens and anyone breaks out from the US side?
There are no young players on the US team.
Yeah.
Like they're literally the youngest player, the youngest rostered player was Alex Freeman, and he's 21.
Okay.
And so
and he's a defender, Villarreal.
And he's a defender from Villarreal. The U.S. is not going to bring in young players into this tournament. They're going to bring in older players that can handle the gravity of the moment, right? If you're looking at this, then if you're talking about young players, you've got to talk about Gio Reyna. You've got to talk about Ricardo Pepi, right? You got to talk about Malik Tillman, who plays for Bayer Leverkusen. Those are the ones you're going to want to watch, right? Then you've got, Balogun, Folarin Balogun, who's tearing it up for Monaco right now. He's 24. So does he classify as young? Maybe. There's a lot of youngish players in their, 22, 23 to 25. That's the bulk of the U.S. team. That's where a lot of that sweet spot is. Interestingly, there's very few old players. The oldest player rostered so far has been Tim Ream at 38, and looking every inch of his 38 years old, just not able to keep up with the pace, right?
Yeah.
Outside of Tim Ream, there is no other player older than 30 years old.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that's an interesting fact, because in the past, the U.S. used to be filled with older, wiser veterans, savvy guys, wily players, right? That's not the case here. It is, while not a young team in the sense that there's not a lot of youth, it is a young team in the sense that not everybody is terribly old.
Average age will be in the 22, 23, 24 range, I imagine.
No, average age will be 24s, 25s, which isn't young, but it is on the lower end, right? So, and then the one player who got injured, actually, who's been really interesting, Johnny Cardoso out of Atletico Madrid. He's been very good for Madrid and getting substantial minutes, and I think that this could be a breakout. This could be a breakout for him.
Okay. My hope is that the US qualify and the nation sort of, obviously, so there's momentum and obviously it's going to be a wonderful festival. I do think there will be a positive knock-on effect if the US do not qualify from the groups here, which will be, there will be a national sort of sentiment shift. And all of a sudden, the desire will be that the US needs to be more competitive on the national stage, particularly sort of in the US men's national team. So I think there will be a sort of Italian-like style, sort of like, okay, stop, we're doing this all wrong. We need to course correct here and sort of go and sort of
push. But they already, and sort of go do that. The only problem with that is that they already did do the course correction about 6 years ago.
So this is the byproduct of the course correction.
No, you can't course correct that quickly. It doesn't work that way. That's not how it works. They eliminated the entire system that had been in place since the 90s. Was dismantled 6 years ago.
Interesting. Okay. And
because that's where they had the U.S. development, right? The DA camps, where these were clubs where kids were coming in and they were being earmarked and taught to play in a particular way. They dismantled that six.
Interesting. Okay. So they've kind of caught in the middle of that, like, it's such an oil tanker to turn around and try and sort of do that.
But I mean,
the fruits of these labors.
Look at the U.S. team. The vast majority are playing abroad. This is probably the one American team where most of these players are playing abroad, and even those that are playing domestically spent substantive periods of time abroad. This has nothing to do with, this has more to do with just general mentality, possibly even coaching, I'm looking at you, Poch, than it does with the actual system that's building it up, right? So I don't want to go too much into that. I also want to call out two Paraguayan players that you omitted.
Okay, go for
Julio Enciso, who plays for Strasbourg. He is 22. I mean, wow, what this guy? He's the heir to Almiron.
Okay,
right. He is the heir apparent, and then Brian Ojeda. Who most people don't pay any attention to because he plays for Orlando City. He had a hell of a season last year, like really good. Of course, this year, Orlando City is just an absolute toilet bowl. So, I mean, but that don't take away from him and his abilities. I think he could really do well in this tournament.
Interesting. Wonderful. So in terms of your sort of thoughts here, who do you think? So I think we're both in agreement that we think Turkey should top this group. Yes,
Turkey wins the group. I think the U.S. sneaks by in second.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, it's going to be tight.
And then
it's going to be...
I do think it's Paraguay. I do think if there's any team that's going to have a chance to pull an upset, it will be Paraguay.
Okay.
The game, the game between Paraguay and the United States is massive, right? It's just absolutely massive. And if you, I mean, well, they're all massive, right? But it's I don't think
ideal situation is Yeah, an ideal situation is the US go into that Turkey game, that final third Turkey game in LA, knowing that they've got 4 points at the very least, preferably 6, and they know that they should be
4 at
comfortable.
the
And that's it.
minimum.
Yeah, yeah, 4 at the
6
least.
is an
Yeah,
ideal. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
they
So if
really
they
need to
can get
they really need to get at least one convincing win in those opening 2 games. Truly 2 convincing wins, they can go into Turkey and they can actually play with some freedom. And I think that's because that's when the US is going to be at their best, when they play free, not
rather
when
than
they
the
play
pressure.
with nerves, not when they play with
Yeah,
pressure, right?
yeah.
Everybody says pressure makes diamonds, blah, blah. Yeah, it
Well,
does, but it also
it
can make you
cripples
fragile
you.
and brittle and you break easily, and it's not good,
Yes, yeah,
right?
it does
So
for the viewer though. It does make for fantastic viewing as well when you're sort of on the edge of that last 20 minutes to
sure,
go, and they need to get that goal. And if they do it, there's and heroes get born that way as well, right? So there's
they
2 ways to
do.
look at it.
They do, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and coaches also
wonderful.
get fired that way too.
Well, it's
That is
Mauricio
the ugly
Pochettino.
side of the
Yeah,
coin.
Mauricio Pochettino, the Argentinian manager of the U.S. men's national team, will be, well, I don't think he'll be welcome back in this country if they don't get out of the groups. That is for sure. I think there is some pressure on it for sure.
Yeah, that's
Anyway,
minimum expectations to get out of the group. But I honestly have to say that if they don't make round of 16, there will be an inquiry.
yeah, I know. I think he did mention, I think I saw in an interview recently where he said the semifinals is kind of the goal and the target. Honestly, I think that's pipe dreaming. I think that's wildly,
Semifinals would be
wildly
amazing.
unrealistic. Semifinals would be, I think it would be an overachievement, to be perfectly honest.
And what he's doing is he's leveraged. He's like saying, "Hey, Morocco did it. Why can't we? Japan did it. Korea did it. Right when they did the co-hosting,
They
both
got to the
Korea
semifinals. Yeah.
and Japan made it through well against expectations. In fact, it was the first time where people suddenly stood up, took notice, and said, "Wow, these 2 countries can actually play." And you see it because their players are playing all over the world right now. So yeah, no, let's make it out of the group stage first.
I think get out of the groups into the round of 16. If you can get through there, any level after that is an upside and plus and an overachievement, I think. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, Cooligan, as always, that's Group D done. Onwards and upwards. Keep following, listening, like, follow, subscribe, all those wonderful things. I'll see you in Group E. Thank you.
Peace.